Greetings, Mark Garang, publisher of The Sun, and today my guest is Chris Bright, who's a Republican congressional candidate. Chris,
thanks, Mark.
How you doing?
Appreciate having me on.
Hey, just want to set this up first. So here we are, the primary, even though people are going to be watching and saying, wait a minute, we just voted.
Right.
Yeah. So the primary is next September.
We still have a whole nother year.
Yeah. So yes, and you're a Republican candidate.
Correct.
Now, this is the first district. Our congressman is Chris Pappas, who's been a congressman for, I think, 8 years now.
Correct.
In 2018. And so he's running for Senate.
Yeah.
So it's wide open. And on the Democrat side, although we're not going to be talking about the Democrats here, Jeanne Shaheen's daughter's running, Morris Sullivan's running, who ran 2 times ago or 3 times ago.
Right.
And on your side, you were the first to announce a candidacy. And there's one other person, who I have to read the name because I don't know who it is. It's Melissa Bailey from Bedford.
Mm-hmm.
Not huge name recognition so far. And we were talking off camera because I was going to ask you about Russell Prescott, who did win the primary last year when you ran, but you said is not running this year.
I guess I'm officially announcing it for Russell.
Yeah, sorry.
But I talked to Russ a couple of weeks ago, and he indicated that he was not going to be running, and he's taking some much needed time off with his wife. He's overseas right now, so real good guy. We had a lot of respect for him last cycle. In fact, after he beat me in the primary, he hosted a fundraiser for him. So yeah, I think the world of that guy, and wish him the best for sure.
I mean, so you're the presumptive front runner.
I guess you could say that when there's nobody else in, right? But I'll be honest with you. I didn't enjoy the actual game of politics. Like I'm super passionate about the issues. I have committed my life to public service. I left for West Point 5 days after I graduated high school, and so it's been a life of selfless service. But like getting into the whole Washington D.C. and the politics side of it, it wasn't really for me. So when I finished the campaign, well, let me back up. This time last year, going into the election, first poll comes out, and it might have been like, Chris Bright, I never heard of her, right? Like 0.0% name recognition. And that was because, one, I had no name recognition. I just got in. Fundraising was down for all candidates. And we had to be very strategic about how we spent our money. So when we started deploying funds in July, the campaign really accelerated at that point. And I mean, we were adding on 100 new social media followers an hour. Started to pick up a lot of momentum. And when the line was snapped on September 10th, the election day, I mean, we were like going like this. We just weren't there yet. So I felt, on September 11th, September 12th, I felt a little bit of relief to have been done with everything. But then it started to feel like almost an obligation to get back and run, to take all the lessons learned, everything that I had experienced, the different supporters that had come on board, and it kind of felt like, what, we need to keep going. I'd be ashamed to quit right now.
And I think I just want to backtrack a little bit because you're from Derry, right?
Correct, yeah.
Were you born in Derry? Are you a New Hampshire native?
So I was born in New Jersey, 25 miles outside of New York City.
Well, that disqualifies you pretty
Listen,
much.
yeah, that was the last we saw Chris Bright, right? I couldn't even go back and live there, but left for West Point, like I said, 5 days after graduation.
So you're West Point, I mean, just to go through your resume, which is very impressive.
Thank you.
You're a West Point grad, you served in the military for a number of terms.
Yep.
And then you went on to academia, so right, you got a degree and here, there, studied at MIT.
So I have a master's in public policy from the University of Missouri. And that kind of was born out of, a lot of the geopolitical work I was doing in the Army. Rebuilt bridges and schools. And
so you were an engineer in the Army?
I started off in the engineers. So I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Corps of Engineers, but this was pre 9/11. So Caleb and I, my campaign manager, were talking on the ride up here about how different it was to serve in the late 90s, prior to a country being at war. And so we did, at that time, Bosnia and Kosovo were the two combat zones that the Army was engaged in. we went into this town called Pasjani where there was ethnic cleansing, and every male over 14 was killed. And so my job at 23, 24 years old was to work with these women who were rebuilding their towns.
Wow.
This is how you build, businesses. Like, okay, we need to get water here. We need to bring electricity in. So it was a lot of geopolitical work with the Corps of Engineers. And then we did something very similar in Kosovo. We rebuilt several schools. I got the Albanians and Serbs to work together for the first time since the war broke out in this town called Pasjani, where we were building a bridge. So all of that, all of those experiences, one, fueled kind of this, public service bug inside of me. But then the Army's got this very small group within the special operations community called Civil Affairs. And they're the ones that do all the geopolitical work for the military downrange. Because of all the work I was doing with the Corps of Engineers, I kind of got pulled into that. And so I'm currently still a civil affairs officer in the Army. Just up until about 5 years ago, I was still jumping out of planes, which hurts a lot more at 50 than it did back in the 20s. But no, it's a passion of mine, and yeah, that's military has definitely shaped a lot of who I am.
And then you went from that to the academia. You get your
Right.
master's, and then you get into business, right?
Correct.
So-
After I left MIT, I went into that was my transition from the military into the civilian world. I got my master's in public policy from Missouri while I was still in the Army, and then came off of active duty in 2004 and went to business school.
All right. So then this is just reading off the internet or somewhere,
Okay.
who knows where, but you were involved with a CrossFit gym and a management company with EV charging. They don't seem like they quite mesh.
Yeah, they don't. So, health and fitness has always been a passion of mine. It's been a great outlet for me to kind of burn off stress. So yeah, I got into CrossFit and kind of said I want to build a gym, and so did that. But my current company is it's actually facilities management. So we're a nationwide company. In August we'll hit our 7th year. We're doing EV charging. It's one of our kind of core business things right now. We're putting in level 3 fast chargers around the country. So
you do the actual installations? I mean,
the installations of the chargers. Yep. So it requires underground directional drilling. A lot of engineering goes into it. Concrete. There's asphalt. Obviously, a lot of different.
Are these the private ones or the ones that's government funding?
Great question. So, yes.
Because one of the knocks about the Biden administration is they allocated X number of zillions of dollars to do it.
$7.62 billion.
And they've got like 9 installed.
Yeah. So that's what's called, so that came from the Inflation Reduction Act. They put this $7.62 billion into the budget for EV infrastructure. Say what you want about EV. I mean, the initial intent was, we need to kind of look at all the networks and strategically place these things. Well, because it was a Democratic administration, they handed over that $7.62 billion project to the unions. And so the unions said, if you want to tap this money, you have to have this certification called EV ITP, EV infrastructure something, I forget the exact word for it. But our company, who was doing a lot of these, said, okay, like how do we do EV ITP? Oh, you have to be union. And it was like, you got to be kidding me. So there was this choke point that was created to be able to access this money and then go out and deploy it. So yeah, for that reason, I think, at the 2-year mark, there was like 7 or 8 places that went in. And now the Trump administration has subsequently canceled that program. So a lot of the people that were putting in projects from, this pool of money, you'll
now,
probably
did you have
see
an
that.
interest in EV in general? Because, I mean, the Republicans, as you know, Trump is pulling the plug on
Right.
most EV stuff.
Right.
So what do you think about what Trump has done or just the direction of EV? You must have an interest in EV or else you wouldn't have got involved.
So the EV stuff for us really came out of, we were a good business partner for a lot of our clients. So my thing has always been with our company, full transparency, like communicate with these people. Like we want to be known as being like ethical business partners, and it's been a great business model. So starting off doing landscaping for a company led us to a $1 billion project to put these things in, because what happened was we did the landscaping for them and we were always on time, and then we did their snow, and like it built, and they're like, hey, can you do the concrete? Of course we could do the concrete. And next thing you know, it was like, do you know a good electrician? And we had been working with electricians, and one thing led to another, and we kind of got ourselves into this, built a team around, and once we started to look out into the future and say, I think there's an opportunity here, we built a team around that. And so the company's been on a skyrocket. In fact, we just hit the Inc. 5000 list again for the
So what happens?
second-
How does that go with Trump shutting down?
Trump, it hurts us, right? And so, ironically, you know, as a Republican, you always take like, oh, you're just, you know, on Trump's coattails and you just make the rich richer. The policies that I support and that the Trump administration is pushing forward, it's hurting a lot of, you know, us bigger business owners. Like Elon Musk also took a huge, you know, a huge hit on
What
that.
do you think about EV in general? I mean, you think we should be? Do you think the government should
I'm
subsidize
not
it?
an EV guy personally. Like, I like cars. I'm like a classic kind of cars guy. My kids going to college for that, and they got me into it. But I do think EV as a whole, the more energy sources we have, I mean, it's better for everybody. So on hot days like this, if you know, a lot of people are going on vacation, air conditioning is running, like the cost of energy is higher. This takes it off the grid a little bit. What I found out though about EV is there's some interesting dynamics there. These EV stations as they sit are not necessarily, like the people that own them, they would rather you almost not charge your car by them. It's fascinating because they have battery packs and they sit on the grid. And so what they're doing is they're buying energy at night when the cost of energy is cheap, storing it and selling it back to the grid during the day.
Huh.
So a lot of these big level 3 EVs, you know, charging stations are there, but because they're not being used, they're turned into profit centers, selling energy back to the grid. So, you know, there's a little bit of arbitrage going on there. And it also helps a little bit with the cost of energy.
And what do you think about just the I mean, we're digressing here a little bit, and we want to get back to what's going on the ground. But what do you think about the general policy of EV versus fossil fuels? You know, the alternative energy people say, wait a minute, you give these huge depreciation allowances to the fossil fuels and all that, blah, 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 and now it's being cut from us.
Right, right.
What's your view on policy?
Again,
energy policy
I just don't like when the government forces things down your throat, right? Like that's where I start to have a hard time. It's like everybody's going to be EV, or all federal vehicles are going to be EV by 2033. Everybody has to take vaccine shots. Like whenever there's these big type of huge mandates, I start to push back, kind of as like, you know, like a free market's kind of like, you know, like leave my freedoms alone. But I don't have a problem. Like I said, it's not something that fits really well within my lifestyle right now. There's not a lot of EV chargers north of Concord. So it was never really cost effective for me, you know, the way, you know, with our travel and stuff, to go EV. But from a macro theory, I do think that, you know, multiple sources of energy, multiple sources of transportation, and let the markets figure it out. That's kind of where I come down on that.
As long as the market's figured out in a fair way, and that's
Correct.
the whole thing. Like one thing that's kind of cool is that, like in the late 1920s, a third of the taxis in New York were electric, and you know there are photos of these buggies with big batteries in the back.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons they went under is because there were so many subsidies for the oil companies.
Interesting.
You know.
Yeah.
But so the
Interesting.
government has its fingers in a lot of things.
The
and that's,
government
you know,
can absolutely pick and choose winners, correct?
Now on the politics now, we do have New Hampshire is it's been a swing state. In this district in particular, and people who have been around here forever know the old Carol Shea Porter.
Yep.
I mean, they swapped. It was back and forth
Yep.
for like 3 or 4
Kinta, yep.
terms. We're generally a blue state, and now we're peculiar a little bit because our federal delegation is Democratic, and everybody else is Republican. Executive Council, State House, Senate, and the governor, of course.
Yep.
And Conway in the Mount Washington Valley, the few towns around here, is surprisingly blue.
Right.
Like and you know the southern part of the county and the boroughs, wealthier, they tend to be more Republican. You know, and Chris Pappas. So I guess a couple things. Like how do you know, I think Chris beat Prescott by like 60% to 40%. I mean, he kind of cleaned his clock.
Mm-hmm.
How do you counter that? I mean, what's the and the other part of that? I guess where I'm really going with this is Pappas is always billed himself as a moderate, and you know, and he always touted that he was one of the more bipartisan members of Congress. I don't know who does those polls. How do you fit into that? Like, what do you think your role is going to be? How bipartisan do you want to be? Where are you on the political spectrum?
Yeah,
terms of,
I'm definitely a moderate. Years before I even thought about getting into politics, one of the biggest things that I saw, from my small little vantage point of, small little business owner raising my kids in Derry, New Hampshire, like kind of just leave me alone. It was concerning to me how, you know, partisan this country had become. And I thought, in such a big country with so much influence around the world and so many different viewpoints, to divide our population into two camps and say you wear a blue shirt and you wear a red shirt, and you have to agree with it. I just was like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. I really do think that one of our biggest vulnerabilities right now as a country is how fractured we are. Because if we can't talk to each other and have good political discourse, if we can't talk about different issues without it devolving into you're a racist or you're a misogynist or you're this or you're that, and we completely miss the whole point, like how does this get better? And we know that in politics and in sales and whatever, fear, guilt, these types of negative emotions really invoke people to kind of, to act. And so politicians for too long have been kind of stoking these emotions just to get people to rally around them and support them. And that just doesn't sit right with me, right? Like at West Point, we were told that you wear your rank on your collar not for personal gain, but to, empower you to be able to take care of the people that you're fortunate enough to lead. And, the values in the military, like selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage, that means being able to actually get up and make the hard decisions and lead and put the people ahead of you, and like in the Army, as the officer, you eat last. You make sure your folks, or their tents are set up, the trenches are dug around their little half shelters before they go to sleep at night. Like you make sure everything is done with all those people you're in charge of before you go to sleep. And that's the type of leadership that I think is sorely lacking. You see people that will say stupid things in the newspaper or on TV so that they can immediately send out, a text campaign after that to try to raise money. They try to get more, TV time by just saying absurd things, and that's not solving any of our problems.
but people say that, candidates and politicians say that all the time, and it's certainly the same on both sides of the aisle. People, first and foremost, politicians want to get reelected. And the Republicans are in power now, so I can talk about them. But of all the Republicans in Congress that said, we got to control the deficit, blah, 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 and they all lined up in back of Trump. Like, how do you see, you're a West Point guy. Do you have the courage to stand up? Literally, none of the Republicans are standing up to Trump.
On a micro level, I think, issue by issue. So let me first start by saying the things that the president is doing right now, I really agree with respect to the border. We talk about tariffs, on the surface level with tariffs. You saw like he's going to crush the economy with tariffs. Well, the thing when you start to look one or two levels below headlines, in 2015, the Chinese Communist Party started this thing called the Belt and Road Initiative. $1 trillion initiative. It's the Chinese version of the Marshall Plan. It's just about done. They have locked up over the last 10 years 100-year trade agreements with a population that amounts to 50% of the world's GDP and 75% of the world's total population. And it cuts out the United States, Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, and a handful of our strongest European allies. And they've got this stated goal of unseating the United States as like the sole hegemonic power. They're going to do currency manipulation. They're going to, weaken our manufacturing base, IP infringement. All of these different things that are going on have really long-term implications. And so we need to be able to make those types of hard decisions. I thought it was very courageous of him to come in and hit with the tariffs because short-term stocks fell, right? You saw some of that, economic slowdown. But this was when we hit all those countries with those tariffs, countries like Mozambique and Djibouti, and like, why are we hitting countries we never even heard of before, right? Those were the countries that signed on with Belt and Road. And so we created this leverage when leverage didn't exist to really go back and claw back kind of the old economic order under the United States, and try to blunt what China's starting to do. Like, I think that's courageous in and of itself, and I support that. And I think one of the things we need to do is a better job of helping people understand the why things are happening, because you could easily say tariffs crush the economy, you go in your blue camp, you go in your red, and let's just fight over it. But I could say things about Trump that I don't like. I didn't like how he dismantled USAID. As a civil affairs guy, we would go downrange into these hostile countries, and USAID would help us get water
So
reestablished.
how, I mean, from your perspective, I mean, we're just lay people, and we hear people who support it say, yeah, they do great things in the world.
Yeah.
And then you hear the other side saying it's just corrupt and it's blah, blah,
That's
blah.
right, that's right.
So what's your sense of, I mean, every organization, big organization, including the military, is a lot of waste and blah, and all that.
That's it.
And, but what about the USAID? I mean, what do you think, how wasteful is it? Is it worth it?
It is worth it. Yeah, it is worth it. And, you know, the work that they were doing was, I think, impactful. The problem was DEI crept into it. And, you know, when you start to say, like, there's all this waste going on in the government, some of the programs that they were supporting, they had a DEI initiative for LGBTQ in Syria. Like, that was real. You can look that up. The average taxpayer here in this country should look at that and say, they have different views on LGBTQ to begin with. Is that really the best use of funds? Why are we spending that money on funds here when there's, I don't know, potholes, or, you know, we've got our own Medicaid, Medicare issues? Like, there's a litany of issues here in the United States that people were like, I wish that money would be better spent here. So what I think happens is you get in, you start to look at these big, lumbering, bureaucratic organizations. It's hard to go in and start to find, you know, some efficiencies. And that's why you saw guys like Elon Musk coming in with these code writers,
Right,
who could look for anomalies in the data and kind of, you know, target in. Now, do I think USAID is gone forever? I don't. I think that enough people recognize the value that it was playing. I think it was a big pendulum swing a little bit too far to the right to make that cut. And I think you'll start to see some of that come back.
I mean, what do you think about, speaking of DEI, what do you think about what's going on with the military, with Secretary of Defense Hegthus, where he apparently removed the woman who runs the Naval Academy, right? And then apparently, like, there are 1,000 gender dystopia people out of the military, forced them out somehow. I mean, what do you think about that? Was DEI to just really take over the military? I mean, was that too much?
DEI did. I saw that firsthand. In 2021, I got asked to come back in to and do some of the civil affairs stuff. It was an airborne unit with Special Operations Command South down in Homestead, Florida. And we did some cool stuff. We did a lot of jumps. We did an annual jump into the ocean every year. And so it attracted, like, tip of the spear kind of people from, I mean, we had Navy SEALs, you had some Army Green Berets. We had really hardcore people. And in the Army Reserves, they'll lay out the training schedule for the entire year. So you could see when you're going to the range. That year, they canceled both of our range weekends because we were red, meaning not 100% compliant on our DEI stats. And I thought that was criminal.
Which means what?
That means that we did not get to go to the range and qualify on our weapons because we had to sit through more DEI classes so that we could report up that everybody had sat through, you know, these different classes. And the ironic part to me was, you know, here I am sitting in this class as a white male. You know, one of it was like, you know, subconscious bias and this and that. I've got a black woman at home running my, you know, 9-figure company, right? That was not a DEI hire. And so you saw guys just get frustrated with that. We kicked a lot of guys out for not taking the COVID vaccine. And through some of these policies, people just attrited out. When they asked me to come back a couple months ago, I was told that the Army was like 25 to 30% understaffed. And we were hitting our recruiting goals now. But we needed more senior people to come in and kind of help train this next generation of soldiers. So I saw it firsthand how it was kind of eroding. To your point, though, about, you know, kicking people out, what Secretary Hegseth is doing and where it's getting kind of mislabeled in some of the more liberal media is we're not trying to have all these different, you know, Italian American, Irish American, African American. He's trying to unite us under just being Americans. I support that as well. I tell this story that about a month ago, I was at Fort Devens, Mass, doing an Army training. And it was the end of our 2-week exercise. The colonel had brought us all into the bleachers. There's about 200 of us there. And he's talking to us about, things. And the cannon goes off at 1700, 5 p.m. And they're lowering the flag. And everybody knows when the flag goes down, you just stand up at it, quietly, you salute. And I remember standing there. It gave me the chills because it was the first time in probably 10 years or so that I was in uniform with a group of people saluting the flag en masse. And I had just knew I was going to announce for Congress shortly after. And I remember thinking to myself, statistically, half of these people were Democrats. It doesn't matter, right? We're here wearing the American flag patch, all in the same uniform, all united for the exact same mission. And wouldn't it be great if this kind of microcosm of Americans could spread across,
But how do you think, I think with the transgender, I think most people just think everybody should do what they want to do, right, in life. Respect their personal gender or whatever. And I think it's an unforced error on the part of the Democrats for years, just like, why are we talking about transgenders all the time? It's like 0.1% of the population. But on the other side is you don't think the Republicans have gone too far. And I guess I go back to the woman who was dismissed or removed from the Naval Academy. That's not just transgender or gender dystopia. That's a woman.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I don't know the full details of that, so I can't necessarily speak to why she was dismissed. I'm going to look into it afterwards.
Okay, let's move off then.
Sure.
So, and I want to get back to what you're going to do as a congressman, but since you're the military guy, the part of the Republican wing, the conservative part, really didn't want to support Ukraine. And Trump seems to be coming around to it now, and that he's finally discovering, like everybody else knows in the world, that Putin, turns out, isn't a nice guy.
That's right.
So what are your stands on Ukraine, and what do you think we should do?
Yeah, so that was another area where I kind of broke a little bit from, my colleagues in the Republican Party, because I thought we needed to, support Ukraine. The United States has to stand for something. And, I was brought up, kid of the 80s or whatever, and the Cold War and, Reagan and joining the military and all this stuff. We were brought up like knowing how bad, Russia was. And Putin, he's a KGB guy. So I've never trusted him from the beginning. I know he plays the long game. I know that, he's far outlasted several different presidents. When they invaded Ukraine, I felt like, the United States and Ukraine wanted to be part of NATO. It was the first time it was an invasion in Europe since World War II. I didn't want to see American soldiers committed to Ukraine. I'm still in the military. My kid's in the Navy. He's actually leaving for South Korea in 2 weeks. There's a saying that says, above all else, a soldier prays for peace. Like that's true. But I would rather spend money in Ukraine to check Putin than have to spend American blood. And the other thing was, you heard the argument early on, well, we're spending all this money, we're depleting our materiel. I didn't see it that way. I saw, a lot of this material has shelf life. I saw M113s, armored personnel carriers, being shipped over there. Those are from the 80s, right? So there's something to be said for kind of taking your older stuff, recycling it. And a lot of that money that was spent ultimately on Ukraine, about 80% of it was spent right here in the United States.
Right, making those things.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, it didn't hurt the economy. It keeps Putin in check. It sends a signal that the United States stands for something and we're going to stand up for our allies. It depleted the Russian military, one of the four in that kind of axis of evil. By all accounts, Russia, if the war would have stopped now, is 5 to 7 years before they'll be back to fully mission capable.
The scale, because in World War II, I think our country lost like 850,000 soldiers. That's a lot. It affected everybody in this country.
Right.
Russia's already lost like 1 million casualties.
Yeah. Right.
What, 300,000 deaths? At the scale of it. And anybody who looks at Russian history with Putin, who was prime minister under Yeltsin, and what he did in Chechnya, there's no way he's going to give up.
That's right.
So what do you think? Let me ask you this way then. What do you think is going to happen? Trump has already just recently or yesterday said, well, we'll give him another 2 weeks before more sanctions. But what do you think should happen?
You're asking me to predict what Donald Trump is going to do. I don't know.
Well, what do you think we should do as a country?
I think we need to continue to put the pressure on Putin. I don't know how much more. I mean, economic sanctions eventually will backfire on us, but I think there's still room to go with economic sanctions against them. I was reading how that's done. It's pretty intricate with the banking system, how they enforce that. I think we still have some pressure that we could exert on them without having that come back and influence our economy. I am not a fan, though, of saying, do it in 2 weeks. And again, I don't know what
Deadlines are tough.
Deadlines are tough because once you put that line in the sands, either you're going to enforce that line in the sand or you're not. And that I think that's hurt us in the past with
Obama did it with Syria and the red line.
I was just going to say that. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but the pressure we've done with Ukraine has been good because here's how that ultimately made us safer. It depleted Russia. North Korea came over and they've lost soldiers now. While that's going on, you had the Houthis and whatever that were firing the missiles and Hamas. Israel took care of them. So when the opportunity presented itself to actually take that nuclear weapon from Iran, they didn't have any allies anymore. Russia was bogged down. China wasn't going to come to their aid. North Korea is helping Russia. It just shows how kind of making the right moves geopolitically in an interconnected world, it really, really sets us up. And so, I think we need to continue to push back. I'm not a fan of, one of the peace treaties right now has Crimea being permanently seceded to them. I don't agree with that because Putin should not have taken that in the first place, and I think that needs to go back.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen?
I don't know. I think we're going to see more of the same. I think this is going to get dragged out. I mean, I don't know what the exit plan is in Ukraine because when historically, going back to like sieges of, Rome and Athens and all those back in the day, once you get bogged down like this, it's tough to get out of.
On both sides.
They're both, they're both bogged down. So once you got through that first full year in the winter and the muddy spring and everything, now they're stuck. There hasn't been a lot of lines back and forth. I know one of the peace things, like I mentioned, was like, okay, let's give back. Let's agree to give Crimea. But if Canada were to invade us and we got bogged down, and all of a sudden New Hampshire is now part of Canada, I don't think it's a fair ask of the United States to just secede that to get out of a conflict. So they're stuck. I think we need to support them, tangentially from the side with weapons and continue to press forward on the diplomatic stage and economic stage and hope that eventually we can get to some type of resolution.
Just one more military question because you're here. We'll have to get back to the politics at hand. But it is amazing how, they're saying now that those drones are basically replacing artillery.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like tanks in World War I that changed everything, rifling in the Civil War, everything changed. Mm-hmm. I mean, one thing, it's been basically a sandbox for the U.S. military, I would think, to see how all these things are working, right?
100%.
The drones.
100%. Yeah. So many different things. So for one, we know Russia's military capabilities now, even prior to them being decimated. The way that they fought and kind of seized Ukraine, that was completely botched from the beginning. They sent an airborne unit to seize the airfield. And that's great. They captured it quickly, but there's no reinforcing units behind. We saw the effects of years of like bribery and how the Russians procure their materiel. When 50 cents on a dollar goes to lining people's pockets, they got really crappy stuff. Yeah. We saw the disintegration of their kind of command and control. And then to your point, drone warfare has really changed the warfare permanently. In fact, the United States is concerned about it. We're trying to look at reclassifying drones because we classify drones right now as the same, like with the same kind of regulations as you would a missile instead of like a plane. And so our own regulations are contributing to us falling behind on drone production. So you have countries like China and Russia that are outproducing us with drones. And when you overlay onto that, they're outproducing us in Navy ships. They have a gap there. They're outproducing us in hypersonic weapons. And the Chinese and the Russians have 3 of the top 4 biggest nuclear weapons in the world. So the United States has gotten a little bit lackadaisical with our investment. We saw it at the end of the early 90s with the first Gulf War. We were the third largest army in the world. We went through the base realignment and closure, BRAC, and coming out of that, we were the 10th largest army in the world. 9/11 happened. We had made those investments into like our equipment. And so even though we were tactically proficient and rolled right into Iraq, once we began to be a stabilizing force there, we didn't have the right equipment. And that's when you started to see guys get killed with IEDs. I was riding around in Bosnia and Kosovo in soft-skin Humvees, right, up and down Sniper Alley. So when you stop investing in this stuff, it takes years to kind of rebuild and get that back. And I'm a little alarmed at where we've fallen with respect to, one, being in all these never-ending wars and Iraq and Afghanistan. We got bogged down ourselves. And then with a lot of just, how polarizing it's become and, budget fights and this and that, I feel like we've kind of taken our eye off the ball a little bit.
All right, we're going to come back to New Hampshire.
Let's do it.
It's fun chatting with you about the military, so you're an expert. How do you see your time? And one thing that, Congress people are definitely all about constituent service. So how do you see your role? Like, how many times have you been in the Mount Washington Valley?
Well, so last cycle when we ran, we got up here twice.
All right.
And I launched in October, so I had 11 months. That wasn't enough. We didn't perform well here.
I mean, how do you see your role? I mean, literally, and I'm not defending Chris Pappas. I'm just saying what he did. But I mean, he was up here all the time. If there was an opening, he was at so and so. If the Cranmore with the ski area was doing something, he was there. I mean, do you see yourself in that kind of role?
I think that's the right way to do it. Yeah, and to your point about can we, Republicans and Democrats come together, I think he did a really good job at that, and I think that's why he was such a political juggernaut. I think the role of your representative is to be present and to represent, right? And you have to go to Congress and represent the views of the people that have given you that honor. To go forward to Washington, D.C., this is what we want. We're going to pick you to go and voice that. I don't think he did a good enough job. I thought he was somewhat non-present down in our area. I have some issues with Pappas.
Because obviously Derry's in the first district.
It is,
and it's a weird district. Is it kind of like, where is Derry? We wouldn't even know what Derry is. Derry, it's sort of like in the middle. It's in the middle south.
And so you come straight up 93 from Boston, and it's Salem, Wyndham, Derry.
Okay, so this district starts on the coast here, and kind of swings in.
It does, kind of goes up to Portsmouth and then all the way up here.
Right.
So I think you need to come to meetings, and not just the Democrat or the Republican meetings. You need to listen to everybody. It's 31% in this district. It's 31% Democrat, 28% Republican, and all the rest are independents. Right. So you can't just go with the people that are wearing your jersey. You have to get out and talk to everybody. And so, I feel like that's what makes a representative good, is somebody who's going to come in, listen to people, synthesize kind of the views of what you want, and then go and have the courage to stand up and fight for the people of New Hampshire, regardless of what party shirt you're wearing.
You were trained as a leader at West Point, and you've taken these leadership positions. Congress is not exactly leadership material. I mean, you're part of a large body that just bickers all the time.
Right.
And your slogan, or one of your slogans, is common sense leadership. Yep. How do you define leadership as a congressman? Like, what can you lead?
So we've got one of the things that has been ingrained into me, and one of my proudest moments was seeing my kid graduate high school, and on the top of his cap, it said, "Lead by example." And I was like, that was my saying, right? It's one thing to tout, the latest leadership book you read or this or that. It's another thing to go out and actually do it. And, so I'll see some people, even on our social medias, like, we get biting, you say silly comments. We got to be above that. We talk in facts, we talk in data, we're empathetic, we want to understand, we want to actively listen and understand, like, truly what's going on with people, and start to think about problems. Take some problems from, I would love nothing more than to have a forum where we could have Republicans and Democrats come in and say, let's talk about some of these issues. You can't all be wrong. We can't all be right.
Well, what do you think the issues are from a congressman's point of view in New Hampshire?
Here in New Hampshire, I think the economy is big right now. Tariffs are certainly hurting folks up here with tourism.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
I was down in Hampton Beach a couple days ago, and we were touring with a couple hotel owners. Same thing down there. If you're in manufacturing, you're hurting a little bit with steel or wood. So economy's big. The another issue I was hearing a lot, not so much because it's been closed down by executive order, but the border was big,
Right.
with crime and with fentanyl. And what I'm reminding folks is that don't get complacent. Like, that was an executive order. We actually need to codify some of these actions that have closed the border into law. So I think that's a big deal. I mean, we still have fentanyl. We still have drugs we're worried about. I think there's
But
work
I think
to be
that
done
whole
there.
Canadian, I mean, fentanyl, we're not Texas. I mean, like there's like 20 pounds of fentanyl coming through Canada.
Right.
I mean, a
Yeah.
little bit of a, red straw man debate up there. For
It
that.
was. I mean, well, I don't know if I would call it a straw man. I mean, what we were seeing in Canada, too, was a large percentage of Chinese coming across the border. Like, those types of things are red flags for me. And then, to your last point, about like what can we do in Congress for the people of New Hampshire, I do think on the international scale, doing things with like the Chinese to make sure like currency manipulation and that we hold them in check, because they are actively trying to do that, and that's hurting New Hampshire and American business.
So what committees would you line up for if you get in?
Well, I mean, I'd be partial to the anything defense and veterans, but I'm also super deep on the economy. I'm passionate about some of those types of issues. So those would be ideal, but I know as a freshman, I'm probably going to get slotted wherever they tell me to.
Yeah.
But so you go in, you do the best job you can, and hopefully you can work our way up.
Good. Well, we went over time, and we sweltered here. It's the hottest day of the year almost. So, Chris.
This was so good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll see you over the next year.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. Thank
Take
you.
care.
All right. That was good.